Inverse battles were introduced in Gen 6 of Pokemon. In these battles, every type interaction is flipped. Unfortunately, they didn't survive past Gen 6, and I think that's a real shame. My name is Matt, and today Elias and I are going to take a look at inverse battles. We'll talk about how the type chart changes, as well as which Pokemon get stronger and which ones get weaker. Alright, let's get started.
What's up, I'm Elias, and in normal battles, grass type moves are super effective against rock type Pokemon, but in inverse battles, rock types resist grass moves instead. On the flip side, resistances turn into weaknesses as well, and so do type-based immunities. So in an inverse battle, water types are weak to fire moves. Ghost and normal are usually immune to each other, but in inverse battles, they're super effective against each other instead. Ground is super effective against flying, poison is super effective against steel, and so on and so on. But a select few Pokemon still have immunities in inverse mode. Type-based immunities are eliminated, but not ability-based ones. As an example, Hydreigon normally has 2 immunities. Its dark typing makes it immune to Psychic, and its ability to levitate makes it immune to ground. It loses its Psychic immunity in inverse battles, but keeps the ground immunity since it's tied to an ability instead.
Immune doesn't look like a real word to me right now. In normal gameplay, Shedinja is immune to 13 types thanks to Wonder Guard. Fortunately, thanks to how inverse battles work, that doesn't become 13 weaknesses when you flip the type chart. Under normal circumstances, a bug ghost type would be immune to normal and fighting, and resist poison, ground, bug, and grass. So Shedinja would just be weak to these types and immune to the rest. But you know who would have a million weaknesses? All of the steel types. Like, literally all of them. Steel is famous for its incredible type matchups on the defensive side. It's got 10 resistances and it's immune to poison. But in inverse battles, it becomes a whopping 11 weaknesses, so steel types are borderline unusable defensively.
The worst type combination in inverse battles would probably have to be Fire-Steel. Heatran's signature combination is good in standard battles cause, you know, steel tends to pair well with pretty much everything. Heatran has 3 weaknesses in normal battles, and that includes a double weakness to ground. It's immune to poison, and it resists 9 types, including 5 double resistances. That means Heatran has 5 4x weaknesses in inverse battles. It gets absolutely annihilated by bug, steel, grass, ice, and fairy type moves, and in exchange it only has 3 resistances. Under normal circumstances in modern games, no Pokemon can have more than 2 4x weaknesses. That's one of the reasons Grass Bug is a terrible type combination, because it's double weak to fire and flying. Parasect also used to have a double weakness to poison, but only in Gen 1. Anyway, Heatran having 5 double weaknesses is practically a death sentence. A flippin' mosquito bite would kill this guy instantly. We could spend all day rebalancing the regular type chart, but at the end of the day, the inverse type chart is a million times more broken. The type chart works fairly well normally, but if you flip it upside down, it's a disaster.
Smogon has had inverse battle metagames available at various times. So today we'll be taking a look at inverse metas in Gen 6, 7, and 8. You can play them by challenging your friends to inverse battles on Pokemon Showdown. These formats are based on the standard overuse tiers, but with slightly different lists of banned Pokemon. Most Pokemon that are banned in normal gameplay are also banned in the inverse meta. But the inverted steel type is so bad, a lot of steel types and Ubers were unbanned for inverse mode at various points. Mega Mawile and Genesect are allowed in Gen 6, Solgaleo was allowed in Gen 7, and Aegislash, Mega Lucario, and Dialga are unbanned in both generations. Most of the Steel-type Ubers were sent back to Limbo in Gen 8, but Magearna and Zamazenta Crown were both unbanned. And when I say Zamazenta Crown is unbanned, I mean only the Crown form. The standard Hero form is still banned, despite having worse stats. Pure Fighting is infinitely better than fighting Steel in inverse mode, and Zamazenta Hero can hold whatever item it wants, it doesn't need the Rested Shield. So Zamazenta's stronger form is actually worse in this Bizarro world. Zamazenta Crown is C rank in Gen 8 inverse, which is lower than Thwackey and Shuckle. In fact, Zamazenta has the same ranking as Lanoon and freaking Pikachu. Hey Elias, do you think you could beat a Pikachu in a fight?
No, he would just zap me with the power of Thor. I would not beat a Pikachu in a fight. I don't think I would beat any Pokemon in a fight.
Caterpie would like to know your location. Blipbug would like to know your location. Most of the bugs would like to know your location, actually.
That's not to say steel types are unusable or anything. I mean, you can forget about the defensive steel types, but Kartana is actually really good in inverse battles because it focuses on offense. Sure, it still has 150 million zillion kabillion weaknesses, but Grass/Steel is a great stab combination. Grass-type moves are normally resisted by 7 types, but in inverse mode, all these types are weak to Grass instead. Combine that with Steel-type stab as well, and you can hit 9 types for super effective damage. Kartana is one of the strongest Pokemon in the game as well, with a base attack stat of 181. That kind of power plus an incredible pair of stabs makes it an absolute killing machine. It's also pretty fast, with a base speed stat of 109, so it gets a lot of chances to outspeed opponents and knock them out. All of that actually led to Kartana getting banned in Gen 8 inverse battles. Its special bulk is pretty much non-existent, but that's a small price to pay when there are so many Pokemon you can just delete. Melmetal is also pretty strong despite being weak to everything that moves. It's a slow, pure steel Pokemon, which you'd think would make it a bad pick for inverse teams, but its HP, attack, and defense stats are off the scales, so it can survive a lot of super effective hits and fire back with Stab, Double, Iron Bash. That move is effectively 120 power, which is going to hit pretty hard when you combine it with a base attack stat of 143. Steel is a million times worse defensively in inverse battles, but it's better offensively.
Hey Elias, do you think you could beat inverse Melmetal in a fight?
No.
Good answer. Besides the steel types, another Pokemon that got unbanned is Giratina in Gen 6 and 7. It's got good defensive stats as well as a Dragon Ghost typing, which is solid defensively in normal battles. But in inverse mode, its 6 resistances and 2 immunities become 8 weaknesses, which makes it a lot worse on the defensive end. So it's actually pretty balanced in inverse mode despite its high stats.
The normal type is buffed by quite a bit in inverse mode. In a standard battle, normal is a pretty underwhelming type. It's only got one weakness to fighting and an immunity to ghost, but every other type does neutral damage to Rattata. Normal type moves also can't be super effective under normal circumstances, but it's a different story in inverse mode. Normal moves are typically resisted by rock and steel types, and ghost types are immune to them, but in inverse mode, normal is super effective against them instead. Since nothing is weak to normal in regular battles, there's not a single Pokemon that resists normal in inverse battles.
If you want perfect neutral coverage in a standard battle, you need at least 2 types of moves plus some other factor. Every Pokemon takes at least neutral damage from normal or fighting, as long as the user's ability is Scrappy. Hello, Megalopony. Water plus Ice is also unresisted, as long as the Ice type move is Freeze Dry. That's one of the things that makes Robot Santa. That's one of the things that makes Iron Bundle so dangerous. You know, I probably should have let you do the Futurama reference, because you're the one that got me into that show in the first place.
That's okay.
Ghost plus Fighting used to be perfect coverage as well, but not since Hisui and Zoroark came along. But in inverse battles, you only need one type to hit everything neutrally or better.
Inverse normal being unresisted on its own is an incredible trait, because any moves you teach on top of that are just icing on the cake. The extra type coverage just adds more Pokemon you can hit super effectively. Obstagoon's guts boosted Stab Facade is even more dangerous in inverse mode, and Knockoff gives you super effective damage against Dark, Fighting, and Fairy types on top of that.
Fairy is Eliza's favorite type.
Fairy is my least favorite type.
I am slandering you on the internet.
Normal getting a huge buff led to Diggersby getting banned in every generation. Not only does it have normal stab, but its ability Huge Power makes it one of the hardest hitting Pokemon out there, despite its low base attack stat. Combine that with Swords Dance, and this Goofus Maloofus can reach an attack stat of 928 in just one turn. Diggersby can also overcome its low speed stat by using Quick Attack, which is a dangerous move in a world where the normal type is actually good.
In a world where the normal type is actually good.
Read your lines, fool.
No.
Porygon-z is another Pokemon that got banned in Gen 8 Inverse. It's got a fantastic special attack stat of 135, as well as boosting moves and abilities like Nasty Plot and Adaptability. Combine that with unresisted normal stab, and Tri-Attack is actually the only attacking move it needs. It hits like a truck, so there's no need for extra type coverage. That means you can fill its moveset with status moves. Your options include Trick to give Pokemon like Blissey a pair of choice specs they don't want, Recover to heal, Magikarp to bounce status moves back to your opponent, the list goes on. There are some great ghost types in inverse battles like Dragapult and Gengar, and they get mollywopped by a supercharged Tri-Attack. Porygon-z is a good but not great Pokemon in normal play, but it's an absolute menace in inverse mode, so it wound up getting banned as well. Yet another example of the Porygon-z theorem in action, ladies and gentlemen.
Another notable type we should take a look at is Ice. During normal gameplay, Ice is infamous for being an atrocious defensive type. It's weak to fighting, fire, rock, and steel, and in exchange it resists itself, and that's it. There are defensive Ice-type Pokemon out there, but they don't function well in battle because their typing lets them down. But if you're playing inverse mode, defensive Ice types become a lot more viable. Now they have 4 resistances and just 1 weakness to Ice. Avalugg is one of the biggest winners out of all of the Ice types. It's got a base defense stat of about infinity, which gives it the bulk it needs to be a physical wall. Blissey is a terrific teammate for Avalugg because they form a great defensive core. I'm pretty sure nobody in the observable universe has used the word terrific since the 70s, but you know what, that's okay. Blissey can eat special hits for breakfast, and Avalugg can take on the physical ones. In normal battles, the Ice type holds Avalugg back immensely, so it's usually pretty bad. But it's one of the best Pokemon for inverse mode, now that it has some resistances. For more videos like this, subscribe to MEPlaysGames. You can also check out our podcast MEPlaysGames as well once this video is over. Today, we'll be talking about weird rules in sports.
Articuno is also buffed massively by the inverse type chart. Ice Flying is a bad type combination normally, thanks in part to a 4x weakness to Stealth Rock. That means in regular battles, Articuno has to either hold heavy duty boost to negate entry hazard damage, or take half its health every time it switches in. Articuno has good defensive stats, but it's a bad defensive Pokemon. It also doesn't have the offensive firepower to compensate. But Stealth Rock damage is also flipped in inverse battles, so Articuno's double weakness becomes a double resistance. That means it loses 1/32 of its health instead of half. It can also learn Defog to eliminate hazards for its teammates. Inverse Articuno can wall more Pokemon than regular Articuno can. Bulky ice types are out here living their best lives. You'll love to see it, fellas. One notable ice type move is Freeze Dry, and by that I mean it's completely useless in inverse mode. In normal battles, it's super effective against water, which gives it a useful niche. Sometimes ice types run Freeze Dry alongside a stronger ice move, because the extra coverage is that valuable. But in inverse battles, it's still super effective against water. It doesn't flip like the rest of the type chart, because it's hard-coded to always beat water. But that means there's no reason to use it in inverse battles, because all the other ice type moves do double damage to water types as well. Freeze Dry is weaker than Ice Beam, and the two moves have the same secondary effect, a 10% chance to freeze. All of the Freeze Dry users can also learn Ice Beam, so Freeze Dry has no use in inverse mode.
In modern generations, Cloyster is primarily used as an offensive Shell Smash sweeper. It's a pretty fun Pokemon to use in my humble opinion. And by that, I mean Matt's humble opinion, because he's the one writing most of the scripts. Stop putting words in my mouth. Anyway,
No.
in inverse battles, oh no, he interrupted me. I'm panicking. I can't do this anymore. I quit YouTube. I delete the channel. Anyway, in inverse battles, our guy Cloyster takes on a primarily defensive role instead. Now that the ice type's defensive profile isn't a crime scene, Cloyster will usually put its base 180 defense stat to good use. One move Cloyster often runs in inverse battles is Rapid Spin, a normal type move that removes entry hazards on the user's side of the field. That's a great move in regular singles metagames, but it's got one notable flaw. Ghost types are immune to normal, so they can block opponents from using Rapid Spin. With no normal immunities in inverse battles, spin blocking just doesn't exist. That makes hazard control a lot easier.
There's no inverse ladder for Gen 9 on Pokemon Showdown, but in regular battles, Gold Dingo is infamous for being so good at keeping hazards up. It blocks nearly every hazard removal move in the game. Its Ghost type blocks Rapid Spin, its Steel type blocks Mortal Spin, and its ability Good as Gold blocks Defog. Strike 3, you're out. The only move it can't stop is Tidy Up, but that move is exclusive to Mouse Hold. And nobody's gonna run Mouse Hold on every single team, I can tell you that much. Hi, quick addendum. Sentret gets Tidy Up as well as an egg move. I didn't catch that before I recorded the script. Whoops. But in inverse battles, Goldengo loses its type immunities, so it can't block Rapid Spin or Mortal Spin. In fact, it would become 4 times weak to both of these moves. Combine that with the fact that it's Steel type and therefore weak to a billion moves, and this String Cheese Bozo would be quite a bit worse in inverse battles.
But in Generation 8, another Pokemon that got banned in inverse battles is Rillaboom, and that makes sense considering Grass is one of the best offensive types. Wood Hammer boosted by Swords Dance, the stab bonus, and Grassy Terrain does approximately 8 trillion damage to everything that isn't Avalugg or Cloyster. You've also got access to Grassy Glide for priority on Grassy Terrain, which also hits really hard. This was before Grassy Glide was nerfed as well, so it's 70 base power. Once your opponent's grass resists are taken care of, Rillaboom can come in and clean house. Grass being super effective against 7 types is nothing to sneeze at. In regular battles, Fighting and Ground hit 5 types super effectively, which is tied for the most. So having coverage for 7 types with just one move in inverse battles is incredible. Bug type shares this trait as well. Grass and Bug are tied for the most resisted type in regular battles, so they smack the most types super effectively in inverse mode. Rillaboom is so strong in fact, that people started using its pre-evolution Thwacky when his uncle got banned. It's obviously got worse stats, including 40 less attack and 5 less speed, but it still hits hard enough with Grassy Glide to be useful. It can also take hits reasonably well by holding an Eviolite.
Serperior was banned in Gen 6 and 7, for reasons that are somewhat similar to Rillaboom. Not only does it have Grass Stab, but it also has Contrary as an ability. Contrary inverts stat changes, which, come to think of it, is pretty fitting for inverse battles, but it's also kinda busted. Serperior can learn Leaf Storm, which normally lowers your special attack by 2 stages when you use it. It's a grass type clone of Draco Meteor. But with Contrary, your special attack is boosted by 2 stages instead. With how strong the grass type is in inverse battles, not many Pokemon can deal with Serperior. Even Chansey gets 2-shot by a +6 Leaf Storm, and that's the bulkiest Pokemon on the special side thanks to Eviolite. And maxing out Serperior's special attack is really easy, since you reach +6 with just 3 uses of the move. Contrary Leaf Storm is manageable in regular battles because grass isn't the greatest type in the universe, but in inverse mode it's a different story.
In a universe where grass type is actually good.
In regular battles, Dragon and Ghost are the only two types that are super effective against themselves. So if there are two Dragon types on the field, one of them is probably going to perish pretty quickly, assuming neither player switches out. Leaving a Dragon in battle against a faster Dragon is usually pretty dangerous, but in inverse battles, half of the types have that dynamic with themselves. 9 types resist themselves in normal battles, namely Water, Grass, Fire, Electric, Ice, Steel, Poison, Psychic, and Dark. But in inverse battles, they're all weak to themselves. Now you can literally fight fire with fire. As we've seen throughout this video, Pokemon's type chart was only really designed to go one way. Inverting every matchup leads to a way less balanced game. Cough, Steel type, cough. The most weaknesses a Pokemon can have in normal battles without adding a third type is 7, a record that's shared by Tyranitar, Abomasnow, and a handful of other Pokemon. But in inverse battles, every single Steel type has more weaknesses than that.
It is rough out here in the suburbs for our guy Steelix. So inverse battles aren't that great from a balance perspective, but they're still fun to screw around with. They mess with your noggin, because you basically have to unlearn everything you know about Pokemon types. It wouldn't make sense to make it the main competitive format or anything, but I think it'd be nice to include them in the games anyway. Just another option to play around with. There are also mods that invert the type chart in older games, so leave a comment if you want to see us play them. But that's all we got for today. If you want to stay tuned for Me Played Games, stick around and click the link on the end screen. We'll see you all next time. Good night, fellas. Sleep well.